Hello and welcome back. I'm really glad you're here. For the next several weeks, I'm going to do episodes about what's happening at summer camp. Summer camp is my favorite for a few different reasons. Number one, it's because it's a lot in a short amount of time. The kids are there for 3 hours a day. And it's packed into just 2 months. So there's a lot of time that we're spending together. Also, it's different kids at different times. So the dynamics are always changing and just kind of anything can happen. It's a bit unpredictable. I also tend to get quite a few new students in summer camp every year. This year, I have a lot of new students. And so all kinds of new stuff happening. So each week I will record an episode about what we did that week, how things went, some of the challenges that come up, and how I handle different situations. So this one is all about our first week at summer camp. Okay, I've been trying to remember to take notes so that I can remember everything that goes on. Summer camp this year is limited to 10 students a day. If you don't already know this about Starfish, all our kids are together, regardless of how old they are and regardless of where they're functioning. They are all together because I have found that we all have things we can teach each other. We all have things we can learn from each other. And just because someone's older doesn't mean they are more socially skilled than someone who's younger. And just because someone has a higher IQ doesn't mean they're more socially skilled than someone who doesn't. So we are all in it together, and it's pretty magical. We started on Monday because we have so many new students. I started on Monday with just a general rundown of expectations, which at Starfish Social Club, they're pretty minimal. I don't have a lot of rules. I don't have a lot of things that I expect kids to do. It's kind of part of the program that kids can make their own choices and they get to see the natural consequences of the choices that they make. What we do talk about is that our facility is located inside an office building. And that means that everybody around us is working. So when we go out the door of our suite, we are expected to be quiet and calm until we're out the front door of the building because everybody around us is working. This kind of situational awareness is something that most of my students do not have automatically. Not even my kids. We all know adults who are freaking loud inside of a building where people are working. So it's just helping to build that awareness that there are people all around us and they're all in their work environment. So just helping the kids think about that. There's also an elevator in the building, and this year we're on the second floor. So I don't care at all whether kids want to use the stairs or the elevator, but we do talk about how the elevator isn't a game. We don't get to keep coming up and going down and coming up and going down. We go in quietly, we push the button, and we get out when the door opens. So that's really the only expectation for the elevator. We also talk about how we wait to the side when we're waiting for the door to open because people may be coming out. Other expectations, we are at Starfish as a group. So we don't kind of go off on our own. We stay together as a group. And that's pretty much it. The first thing that we do every day is we walk to a playground that's in a park next to our facility. To get to the playground, it's about half a mile each way. So we walk there. We are in Texas. It is very warm here, but most of the walk and almost all of the playground is shaded. And we go first thing when camp starts so that we are back when it starts to get really kind of uncomfortable in the middle of the afternoon. So we walk about half a mile to get to the playground. More situational awareness. We talk about how we always walk on the right side of the path so that people can go around us, people coming toward us, people coming from behind us. Since it's the middle of the day, there's not a whole lot of people out. Again, it's very hot where we are, but there are people out. There are people on bikes, there are people walking dogs, there are people running, and we're a big group. And so we always talk about staying to the right so that we're not in other people's way. On Monday, when we got to the playground, it's a really big playground and there's all kinds of stuff that kids can do. We always, every year, the group ends up gravitating toward the merry-go-round. Even this year, when there was so many new kids who don't have that prior experience, that's what's been happening. So it's really interesting. I think the merry-go-round is completely in the shade. There's a bench next to it. So if kids don't want to be on the merry-go-round, they can sit on the bench and still be part of the group. I think it's also something that you can just sit on and still play. You don't have to put a lot of work or effort into it. And it's something that a whole group of kids can play on at the same time, as opposed to a slide or, there's only, I think, 4 swings. So everybody can be at the merry-go-round at the same time. And so I think there's just multiple reasons why we all gravitate toward it. One of the students who was there on Monday, he has been with me on Zoom during the school year. So he's not new to Starfish, but this was his first time coming in person. There were several students that he was familiar with because they also were on Zoom during the school year. And then again, there's several new kids. So we go to the park, and when we got there, he went off on his own and sat at a picnic table that was not with the rest of the group. And so I just left him alone. But after a while, I noticed he's a teenager. I noticed he was on his phone. My only rule about phones, kids are more than welcome to bring phones as long as they're not a distraction to themselves or the rest of the group. So we just expect that they're put away. But for example, if a kiddo wants to look something up, if they want to take a picture of something, all that's totally fine. We just don't use them for texting, YouTube, social media, things like that while we're at camp. So I went over to him and just let him know that I was totally fine with him hanging out by himself if that's what he chose to do, but not with his phone. And so he said that he didn't like any of the other kids that were there, which I thought was an interesting statement because he didn't even really talk to any of them. He didn't make any attempts to really engage with any of them before making that decision. And so I pointed that out to him. I said, there's kids here that you've never even met before. And I said, and there's kids here that you've gotten along with for months when we've been on Zoom. So I said, it doesn't really make sense to my brain that you would say that you don't like the other kids here because you either have liked them in the past or you haven't even talked to them to know that you don't like them. So he kind of stuck to that idea that he didn't really like the other kids. And so I just told him, I said, then he asked me if he could go home. And I said, no. I said, we're here until 4:00. One of the things for any of us that are teachers, parents, counselors, anything, is for every one of our kids, we have to know their line, right? We have to know where the line is between how much we can push them without pushing them over the edge. And that line is in a different place for every kid. So that's something that's really important to me for all of us that are working with anybody, really, even, in friendships and romantic relationships, we all have that line. And so it's really important to me to find that line and to respect it. With this student, I knew that I could push him pretty far and we would be okay. And so I was pretty firm with him and I let him know that If he chose to isolate himself for the rest of the afternoon, totally fine. That's his decision. But it was going to be a really boring day because he wasn't going to be able to just hang out on his phone. If he chose to isolate himself, he wouldn't be part of anything else that we were doing. And it was going to be a really long, boring day if that's what he chose to do. And then I walked away because my goal is to plant a seed in his brain. It's not to start an argument with him. It's not for us to have a discussion or a conversation. I got a whole bunch of other kids that I need to go, be hanging out with. I just wanted to plant that seed in his brain. So probably about 5 minutes later, it was time to start walking back to Starfish. So gathering everybody together, herding the cats, and we start walking back, and he started walking next to me. And we get kind of strung out because, there's 10 or 12 of us. And so he decided to walk next to me, and he started asking me questions about the other students. He asked about a couple of students that he knew from Zoom, and he asked me if they were on the spectrum or if they had Down syndrome. And I said, they're on the spectrum. And then he said, what is Down syndrome again? I don't remember. So then we started talking about what Down syndrome is. And then he starts talking about other people that he knows, and then thinking about other kids at Starfish, talking about kids that were at Starfish and aren't at Starfish this summer because they don't live in San Antonio. And he was showing a genuine interest in the other kids. Some of them were kids that were there. Some of them were kids that were not. But I just thought it was a really interesting turnaround from what he chose to do at the playground. And once we got back inside, he was totally engaged for the rest of the day. Absolutely, just like everybody else, totally engaged with what we were doing. So again, I think it's important to be able to find that line with everybody where I wouldn't have had the same conversation with a different kid. I wouldn't have been as firm with a lot of the other kids that I work with. I just knew that with him, that's where the conversation needed to go. And I knew that it would most likely have the outcome I was hoping for. And it did. One of the students who comes to camp, he's been a Starfish student for probably at least 5 years, and he has a physical disability. He had a really hard time keeping up with the group while we were walking back and forth. And the other kids were getting a bit frustrated because it's hot. We're trying to get back, and he's, at the end of the line. And so when I noticed that the other kids were starting to get frustrated and annoyed, I stopped the group and I said, hey guys, I want to share something with y'all. I don't know that you guys know this because a lot of you guys weren't here last year. But I said, last year, this student had surgery and he was in a wheelchair. He came to camp in a wheelchair. He actually wasn't even able to go to the park with us because he was in a wheelchair. So he wasn't able to play. He wasn't able to, he wasn't able to walk like we're walking now. And I said, but look at him now. He's walking by himself to the playground and back. How cool is that? And once we had that conversation, nobody else complained about it again. Nobody else mentioned it again. Nobody else was frustrated with him again. And toward the end of the week, his mom started bringing him to the playground instead of having him walk there with us. And some of the kids would ask where he was because he wasn't walking with us. So sometimes it's just building that awareness. We're all different, and the kids all know that they're different, but helping them understand why and how someone else is different. Every time I do that, it makes such a difference in the dynamic of the group. It just makes them more understanding and more welcoming of something that they previously just didn't understand. When we get back to Starfish, we do about 10 minutes of just quiet time, meditation, turn the lights out. The kids can sit down, they can lie down. We take our shoes off. I play some music and we just chill out for a bit. It helps us re-regulate. It helps us transition. It helps us calm our brains down and our bodies down from being, number one, out in the heat, and number two, on the playground where we were running around. And then for the next part of camp, we do an executive functioning activity. I alternate the days between an art activity, a writing activity, a building activity, and a word game activity. So I'll mix up throughout the week and we'll do one of those each day. There's nothing that anyone has to do at Starfish, so nobody has to participate. I do find ways to accommodate kids who have trouble participating in certain things. We'll talk specifically about writing when I get to the day that we did writing. And the same with art. If somebody truly doesn't want to do something, they don't have to. If they need help with it, I'm always there to help. There's not anything else for them to do. So if they decide not to do the activity, they just hang out with the group. There's not another room where they can go read a book or anything like that. They just hang out with the group. So there was one kiddo who, the art activity on Monday was for them to draw a picture. Oh, I'm sorry. I have an arrow because that was Tuesday. Monday was building. Okay, so I'll get back to the art story. Monday was building. So I brought out Legos. I have tons of Legos. And the challenge was to build something for somebody else. So think of somebody that you know, think of something that they like, and what can you build for them that represents them? So not about us, not about you, but about somebody else. And everybody has a different speed at which they can conceptualize that and do that. For some of the students, it's pretty immediate. I'm thinking of my mom and I'm going to make her, flowers. I'm thinking of my little brother and he likes race cars. Some of the students built things for friends of theirs. Everybody was thinking about something different. But some of the kids just built what they wanted to, right? They weren't really able to think of that. And so I'll tell you when I talk about day 2, what little change I made that kept that from happening again. After everybody was done, one of the really important things I like to do every day after our activity is have everybody share with the group what they made, what it is, who it's for, and why. Again, people don't have to if they don't want to. But usually if students say they don't want to share, it's because they're feeling anxious, and we can totally work through that. So everybody shared what they made. We went into another room so we weren't so distracted by all the Legos on the table, and everybody brought their piece, and they all got to take a turn showing the group and telling the group about it. So number 1, we're practicing talking in front of a group. We also are practicing sharing enough information that people know what we're talking about, but not so much that we're boring everybody. So that's a really interesting, fine balance to find. And everybody else is practicing listening and paying attention. And as we go further, then the expectation is that everybody who's listening and paying attention asks a question about it. So now we're building conversational skills into it. So attention, conversational skills, speaking skills, all that good kind of stuff. So everybody shared what they had made. And then with the rest of the activity time, they could build whatever they want to. I always try to break the activity times into structured, based on a specific task. And then once we're done with that, they can do whatever they want to with whatever we were doing that day. So they were able to do whatever they wanted to with the Legos that day. For game time, which is the last part of our camp day, I do the same thing with time as activity time. The first part of game time, there's a structure, there's a challenge. And then at the end of game time, we have time where they can do anything they want to with the games. So the challenge for day one was to play a game you've never played before. I have a ridiculous number of games. So there are going to be at least a dozen games that kids have never played before because I have so many. And because we tend to default toward the same ones over and over, right? So they could play with anybody they wanted to, and we had a conversation about how you don't have to play with a specific other person if you don't want to. We had a conversation about how we tell somebody if we don't want to play with them. We can just say, no, thank you. We're not, disrespectful about it. So everybody figured out who they wanted to play with, and then they just had to agree on the game that they wanted to play together. Sometimes this is really challenging. I've had kids take 20 minutes just trying to pick a game because they both want to play what they want to play. That actually didn't happen today. Everybody was able to find a partner and be flexible and agree on something to play, which was really cool. So they all played something they've never played before. And then we did that for about 30 minutes. And then for years, the big thing is I have magnetic tiles and I have marble towers. And I started using them probably 4 years ago with a specific student who was just learning how to play games in a group. He wanted to be by himself and he was just learning that concept. And so what I started doing was that became his kind of reinforcer is if he stayed in the group for 30 minutes playing a game, then he was really into the marble towers and he could do it by himself. And I noticed other kids really wanted to do that and they wanted to play with him with the marbles. And so over time, it has morphed into that's what game time is for everybody now. Everybody does about 35 minutes of structured, whatever my challenge for them is, and then about 20 minutes of play whatever you want to. And almost everyone chooses the magnetic tiles and the marble towers. But I only have one set of magnetic tiles. It's not that big of a set. And I have 2 marble towers for 10 kids. So by default, they have to play with them together because there just isn't enough of them for everybody to do their own thing. So that was Monday. One of the things that happened on Monday is one of the kiddos, he's been with me on Zoom all school year. But this is his first time coming in person because he just started last August after camp had ended. And he just really wanted a lot of attention during camp. Camp is not a one-on-one program. It is a group program. And so he didn't want to do the Lego activity. He left the group and was in another room. He was kind of running around. He was making noise. He was kind of hitting the windows. He was trying to get people's attention, but nobody was really paying attention to him, including me. So at one point, I went to go check on him, and he was in the part of our space that's my stuff, which includes where all the games are. And he was in the magnetic tiles, playing with the magnetic tiles. So because that's not where the group was, that's not what the group is doing, the natural consequence of that is that when it was time to play with the magnetic tiles, he wasn't able to because he was playing with them when it wasn't time. He had a really difficult time with that. He, as of Monday, was not a very cognitively flexible kid. He had a really difficult time with that. And he was really pushing, not physically, but really, kind of trying to push the boundaries and kind of seeing how much he could get away with. And so I just let him know that, this was how it was today. And we can always try again tomorrow. Absolutely. Tomorrow he would be able to play with the magnetic tiles. So we made it through the rest of game time. It was pretty rough. Trying to be supportive of him while he was having a hard time, but also holding my ground, right? That if you're in my stuff and you're playing with something when it's not time to, That's the natural consequence of it, is that you don't get to play with it when it is time to. I don't have anything blocking the area that's mine. There's a wall that comes out and you just turn the corner and there's all my stuff behind the wall. But we do talk about how everything at Starfish is my stuff. So just like how I wouldn't go into your bedroom and start getting into your stuff in your bedroom, this is my stuff. So if you want something, you can ask me and I'll most likely say yes. There's nothing there that's, private or personal. But again, it's helping my kids recognize those boundaries, because a lot of my students just don't have those boundaries of things not being public, of things not being theirs, of, it's not okay to just go up and touch everything that you want to, or go through everything that you see. So I honestly don't really care, but I do care about teaching my students that boundary about other people's stuff and how we treat other people's stuff. So that was Monday. We had a fabulous first day, especially with so many new kids. We had such a great first day. I actually, I was pleasantly surprised, because the kids who've been at Starfish for a while, that's easy. They know how things work. They know what to expect. That's easy. But it's the new kiddos who just don't, right? They don't know because they've never been there, that sometimes we have some bumps along the way. So I was really happy with how Monday went. Tuesday, most of the same kids. It tends to go week by week. So most of the same kids. When we went to the park on Tuesday, on Monday, we were the only people at the playground, which is surprising, because usually last year there were only a couple days all summer where we were the only people there. And so on Monday, we were the only people there. So when we went on Tuesday, some of the new kids were like, "Oh, there's other kids here," which I think other kids there is awesome, because it gives us the opportunity just to engage with new people and to practice our social skills. So I actually get really excited when there's other kids there. The kids do a really good job in natural situations. Sometimes I do a little bit of prompting, a little bit of support, but a lot of times it's not even needed. A lot of times they really just naturally do a good job. So some of the kids ended up playing with kids who just happened to be at the park that day. It was really cool. When we're walking to the park, there was somebody, I think she was walking the opposite direction of us, and she just, said hello to everybody. And most of the kids did not respond, which is really typical. One part of it is not everybody's paying attention, right? A lot of times we're in our own heads, me included. So not everybody's paying attention. Also, society teaches kids not to talk to strangers. If you've been in my world for any length of time, you know that I really have a hard time with that message. And so I stopped everybody and I pointed out that she was saying hello. And one of my taglines is, "We can say hello to anybody." We don't have to have a conversation with a stranger if we don't want to, but we can say hello to anybody. And so I repeated that to the kids. "Hey guys, those of you guys who've been around for a while, remember, we can say hello to anybody." So then several of the kids did. Like they, acknowledged her, said hello to her, and then we moved on. But we don't have to have a conversation with people if we don't want to, but we can say hello to anybody, and then we can just keep walking. So I really want to reinforce that with them. So that was Tuesday. When we got back to Starfish, that was the day that we did the art activity. So I forgot that what I typically do when I have an expectation of the kids in an activity, in order to keep it from kind of being where the Legos were, where some of the kids just were building without, kind of following the expectations, What I did on Tuesday for the art activity is same expectation as Monday, that we're going to create something for somebody else. This time we were just drawing instead of building. So I have colored construction paper. I have colored pencils. The kids can use any color of paper they want, but I don't give them a piece of paper until they tell me what they're going to draw and who it's for. So that's how I keep it from just being a free for all, is before I give them a piece of paper, they have to tell me what they're going to draw, who it's for, and then they get to pick the color they want, and then they can go with it. So I had one kiddo who never was able to think of something that he wanted to draw for somebody else. So he ended up not getting a piece of paper. He was talking to the other kids and watching the other kids. And I asked him several times if he had thought of something. And I was trying to, let's start with who you want to draw something for. Who do you want to think about? Who do you want to draw something for? And he just kept saying, I don't know. I don't know. We never really got anywhere. So the kiddo from Monday, who had been in the magnetic tiles, again removed himself from the group, again was kind of being squirrely and running around. The kid who didn't want to draw ended up joining him, and they ended up literally running around the room. So I just kind of put my body in the way so that they couldn't keep running around the room, and was able to kind of capture the kiddo who didn't want to draw. And we had a conversation about how it's always okay to not want to do something. It's okay to not want to draw. That's totally fine. Or you can come back to the group and think of something that you want to draw. I said, but here's my concern. And I was saying it so that both of them could hear me and the rest of the group. I do a lot of talking out loud so that everybody can hear what I'm saying. So I said, my concern is that you guys running around like this isn't safe, right? We don't usually run inside of a building. So it's not safe for you guys to be running around like this. I said, it's also really distracting to everybody who's trying to work on their art. And I said, next up is game time. And what I know about game time is that we all choose to play with people who make us feel safe, who make us feel calm, who make us feel good. And I said, so you guys running around the room doesn't make people feel safe and calm. So my concern is if you keep doing that, nobody else here might want to play with you at game time. They're probably going to choose another kiddo who's sitting with the group working on the activity because they all feel safe and calm together. Again, my goal is to plant seeds in kids' brains. So I didn't even really care what they did next. I was hoping they wouldn't keep running around the room, but I'm not going to physically hold on to somebody and keep them from running around the room. I don't ever yell at anybody. I don't, nobody's ever in trouble at Starfish Social Club. That's not a thing. There's just natural consequences for things that happen. So that kiddo immediately went back to the table. And then I thought, I need a way to engage him because I don't think he wants to do the art activity. So then I realized a bunch of the pencils needed sharpening, and I just have the little handheld pencil sharpeners, just, the little boxes. So I asked him if he would be in charge of sharpening pencils, and he was all over that. So now I had him back engaged in the group. And without him, the other kiddo was not as interested in running around the room anymore. So then we did the same thing. Everybody got to share with the group what they made and who it was for. And it was really cool to hear the things that kids made and who they were for and why they made them. It was just really cool to hear them thinking about other people and having ideas about what other people like. And then again, once we shared after that, everybody could draw whatever they wanted to. So I gave everybody another sheet of paper and they could draw whatever they wanted to until the activity time was over. We then went to game time, and I had a student on Tuesday who was new. Tuesday was her first day, and she did not want to play with anybody else. She was telling me she just wanted to play a game by herself. And I said, well, I don't have any games that are just for one person. And that's not how game time works here. The only expectation for game time is that you're playing with at least one other student. So I said, that's just not really how it works here. I could tell that she was feeling anxious. Anxiety looks very different in different people. So I think to someone else, it may have seemed like she was just trying to get out of it, or that she wanted my attention, or, whatever the case may, she just wanted to do what she wanted to. But what I saw is she was feeling anxious, possibly that the other kids wouldn't want to play with her, possibly because she didn't really know them since it was her first day. So she just wasn't really willing to play a game with someone else. So what ended up happening, I actually didn't know this was gonna work out as well as it did. One of the other groups, the challenge on Tuesday was to play with somebody you haven't played with before. So some of the kids, again, have been in Starfish for years, so they had to choose one of the new kids, and then some of them it was just, play with the kid you didn't play with yesterday, but play with somebody you haven't played with before. So one of the pairs of kids was playing Connect Four. And after a while, one of them asked to challenge me. He asked if I would go against him in Connect Four. And so I just had this I think I did one round. I think we did one round together. And then he asked me again, and I just had this idea, and I looked at the kiddo who wouldn't play, and I said, "Hey, I'm really busy right now. I need to go help these kids with this game. Will you please go take my turn?" And then I just walked away. Because I don't want to give her the chance to say no. I just walked away. And she went right over and sat down and took a turn. And then she came over to me. She's like, "Okay, I did it." And I was like, "Oh no, I mean, I need you to play the whole game. Like I'm trying to help these kids learn how to play this game. I need you to play the whole game for me." And she did. I did not know how well it was going to work, but she went and played the whole game. And then I did it again the next time he asked, and it worked again. So she ended up in the group after that because now she's engaged and she's involved. I think sometimes kids want somebody to come ask them to play, but when everybody else is preoccupied with what they're doing, they're not thinking about asking another kid to play with them if they already have their own thing going on. So I think sometimes that's what a lot of kids want, is they want someone to come up to them and ask them to play, but everybody else was doing their own thing. They're not noticing her, they're not paying attention to her. They're doing their own thing. So that strategy usually doesn't work out. So then we went through the rest of game time. We made it to marbles and tiles. We were good. We had another really great day. Day 3 on Wednesday. Again, other kids were at the park that day. There was a group of 4 girls that were when we got there, they were on the merry-go-round, and the kids were like, "Oh no, they're on the merry-go-round." And I was like, "Oh yay, they're on the merry-go-round." And so sure enough, they all played together on the merry-go-round. One of my rules for the merry-go-round is that if you ride, you also have to push. So I made sure that all the Starfish kids were taking turns pushing. Um, but it was really great to have, that many other kids to be able to hang out with. Our activity on Wednesday was we did a word game. So we did categories. Everybody in the group got to take a turn choosing a category. The challenge, so I needed to explain what a category was. Some of our kids are young, some of our kids have some language processing challenges. So I wanted to make sure everybody knew what a category was. So everybody got to take a turn choosing a category, and then we went around the group and everybody named something that belongs to that category. We had to choose a category that people would know answers for. So for example, Pokemon characters is out. Fighting video games is out. It has to be something that everybody would be able to have an answer for. So we did things like colors, fruits, movies, fast food restaurants, right? And we only did one turn going around the circle because I knew the longer we went on, the more kids would have a hard time thinking of answers. And I didn't want to push anybody's frustration level. That wasn't the point at all. But another thing is we always go in the same order because we're going around the group. And so I expect the kids to pay attention to when it's their turn, which really just means you don't even have to pay attention to the whole game. You have to pay attention to the person who's always before you. So once you hear them give an answer, now you know it's your turn. But also in the game of categories, you can't repeat answers. So you do need to pay attention to what other people said, because if you repeat it, you just lost your turn. So we're working on our ability to pay attention, our ability to know when it's our turn, our ability to think, our ability to adapt, because sometimes somebody before you will say what you were thinking, and then you have to think of a new thing. There's always the option to pass. So again, I don't want to push anybody's frustration level. If you can't think of anything, you can pass. So a couple kids used that a few times. So that was our challenge. And that one was definitely more difficult than building or drawing. So I ended that one early and we started game time early because that one was definitely more mentally taxing. But the kids really enjoyed it. Everybody had a good time with that one. For game time, what I did usually I wait until later in the summer season to do the more challenging ones, but this is such a great week. I just decided to throw it out already. I had everybody pick a partner because I needed every group to have the same number of kids. So everybody picked a partner and then they picked a game and they started their game and I set a timer for 10 minutes. And I didn't tell them what was going to happen when the timer went off. But what happened was when the timer went off, I picked one kid from each pair and I had them move to a different game. I had them switch places with one of the other kids I had called on. So now they're no longer playing with the person that they chose. Everybody handled that so well. Nobody got upset. Nobody got frustrated. Nobody refused to move. Nobody was upset that they didn't want to play with this kid. They handled it so well. So in another 10 minutes, when the timer went off again, now the kids who had stayed the first time, they got up and they switched places with each other. So now everybody's playing a new game and with a new partner. And again, beautiful. Everybody handled it so well. So then we went to marbles and tiles a little bit early. I try to do that when I feel like we're just doing a really great job of being flexible and working as a group. So we did marbles and tiles early. One of the things that happened during game time is I had two kids playing chess and they're both younger. And they were playing chess, but what I noticed is that one of the kids was trying to play chess by the rules, and one of the kids was trying to integrate some imagination into it. This is really common, especially with younger kids, where they're playing an actual game with actual rules, but they want to do something to integrate imagination into it. So for example, one of the things he was doing was he had a ball from another game and he was rolling it into the other students' characters. And I don't remember why. I don't remember what he was trying to do with it. But the student who was trying to play chess by the rules was getting really frustrated and annoyed. And he has a really low frustration tolerance. And so he started, kind of raising his voice. Hey, stop it. Stop doing that. So I said, let me tell you guys what I noticed. I said, you want to play this game by the rules and you want to play this game with your imagination. And both of you guys are getting a little bit frustrated with each other because you're not playing the same way. So how do you guys want to solve that problem? And what was interesting is when the first student who was trying to play by the rules, when he heard me explain that, then he decided he wanted to play the way the other kid was playing with the ball. He just didn't realize this is anytime there's a conflict, it's because two people are not understanding each other. I mean, in my opinion, that's the core of every conflict ever, is you just have two people who don't understand each other's perspective. So he just didn't understand that the other kiddo was just trying to use his imagination and add this new component. He thought the other kiddo was just being annoying, right? And trying to bother him. So then they ended up playing chess with this ball, knocking each other's pieces over. It was just such a great change. And because that first kiddo is pretty rigid, he's not always super flexible. So I thought that was really cool that he just went with it. So that was Wednesday. At the end of the day, when we're cleaning up to get ready to go, one of the kiddos had built with the magnetic tiles, and another student, one of the young kids, went over and picked up his hand like he was going to smash it. And the kid who built it was going, no, 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 no. And then there was about a 5-second pause, and the kid smashed it. So it was interesting because there was enough of a delay that he could have made another choice, but he chose to smash it. The kiddo who had built it is a pretty flexible kid. So he definitely got upset, but he didn't yell. He didn't, hit. He didn't do anything like that. So I just told the kid who'd smashed it, I said, I think the best way for you to solve this is to help him rebuild it. And so he did. He immediately jumped in and helped him rebuild it. And then we all just moved on and went home. But I thought that was really interesting that there was that delay where he could have walked away, made a different choice, but he chose to smash it. But again, natural social consequences. Now this kiddo may choose not to play with him tomorrow, right? Because he smashed this thing that he built, but also he's got to fix it. So we were able to end the day with that. On Thursday, there's not a reason for kids to bring things to camp. We bring water bottles and we bring shoes that are appropriate for walking to the playground. Other than that, like I said, phones are fine as long as they're put away. There's not a reason for kids to bring anything else to camp. So one of the parents asked if their kiddo could bring a book. And I told him, as it does not matter to me. Just know that there's not a time that we read, and he's going to have to be responsible for it. So as long as he can handle that, it doesn't matter to me. So he brought a book, which was about Godzilla. And some of the kids had been having a conversation about Godzilla the day before. So he came in, kids can come early and have lunch together if they want to. So some of them do and some of them don't. And he's one of the kids who does. He came in with his book and he sat down with me to talk to me about it. And so I said, yeah, I don't really care about Godzilla. Because one of the things that's really important for me to reinforce is that we all have different interests and hobbies and things that we like to talk about. And it's really important for everybody in the world to recognize who the people are that like the things that they like so that they can talk to those people about it, and to recognize who the people are that aren't interested in talking about the things that they like. But each thing may have a different audience. So I just said to him, yeah, I don't really care about Godzilla. And I said, who do you know that does? And then he was able to think about the two kids from the day before. So I said, yeah, as soon as one of them comes in, that would be a great person to show your book to. And that's exactly what happened. As soon as one of those two kids came in, the two of them were all over it. And then the other kid came in and oh my gosh. And then it turned into a whole group conversation about when things were created. So when was Godzilla created? When was Marvel created? And one of the kids took out his phone and was Googling it on his phone because he didn't really care about the conversation, but that was his way of being involved in it, is he was the one providing the answers. And so the whole group is having this conversation and thinking of when was such and such created. So now everybody can participate in this conversation, even if they don't really care about Godzilla or Marvel or whatever. And then I was having them do the math. Okay, so if this was created in this year, how old is it now? And so then we were throwing some math in there. We determined that Godzilla is 70, I believe, by the way, in case anybody's interested. I think it was 70. Which the kids really got a kick out of. At the park on Thursday, another really cool thing that happened is the kids started trying a bunch of the different equipment aside from just the merry-go-round. So there were kids climbing on the monkey bars. There were kids on the swings, which in the years past, I've always had quite a few kids that gravitate toward the swings. This year, I really haven't. But on Thursday, several kids were swinging. So I really liked that they were just trying new things and going to different places in the playground. I thought that was really cool. Our activity for Thursday was a writing activity that I love. All these things I just make up, but I tend to do them on repeat because I love them. So this writing activity is a group story that we write together, but every student can only contribute one sentence at a time. Sometimes we do one word at a time, which is hilarious. But a sentence at a time is easier. So since this is our first week, the students who wanted to could write for themselves. So that was mostly the older kids. They wanted to write for themselves. So what they did is they sat in a group and they each got to start their own story. So they each got to write the first sentence, and then they put their story in the middle of the group. And when one was available that wasn't theirs, they would take it and write whatever sentence was next. The only expectation is that it needs to make sense. It can't be something really random and off the wall. It needs to make sense. And so then you add your sentence and then you put it back in the middle, and you take another story and you add your sentence and you put it back in the middle. Every time I do this, the stories are so funny that, I mean, you get to see everybody's different personality, everybody's different sense of humor. They're so funny. And because they're a mix of everybody, it's just the coolest thing. So that's what the older students did. The younger kids, we did the same thing, except I wrote for them. So we sat on the floor together and I just went around the group and they just told me a sentence, one sentence at a time. And I wrote it down for them to make our story. And then every 4 sentences or so, I would read it so we knew kind of where we were. Obviously, the younger kids struggle a little bit more with sentences making sense with what has just happened. So I have a lot of prompting that I do. I'll repeat the previous sentence and I'll say things like, so what do you think the dog would do next? Or in our next sentence, we can talk about, the dog or the boy. Which one do you want the next sentence to talk about? So just a lot more prompting with the kids who are younger to help them understand things flowing and things making sense, because that's definitely a struggle for some kids is the cohesiveness of writing and cohesiveness of the story. So we did that. And then just like every other day, everybody gets to share. Some of the kids couldn't read each other's handwriting, which even my handwriting is not good. So I ended up reading all of the older kids' stories to the group because some of them couldn't read each other's handwriting. The older kids all got to end their own story. So they got to write their final sentence. And then I read the younger kids' story to everybody as well. And then what I did was I said, anybody who wants to do this again, come with me. And if you don't, you can just hang out. You can draw a picture to go with the story you wrote. You can just chat with other kids. You can just hang out. So you have 2 choices. We'll do another story if you want to. If you don't want to, just hang out with the group. You can chat, you can draw, whatever. So we went about half and half. And so about half the kids, we did one more story, and then the other half just hung out with each other. Game time, I did something similar to Thursday, but what I did this time when the timer went off is I had everybody get up and everybody went to a new game. So they still had their same partner, but now they had a brand new game. And so again, I did that twice. So they went from the game they chose to a totally different game to a totally different game. And again, everybody was so flexible about it. Nobody got upset. Nobody was frustrated. Everybody was so flexible. I always expect that from the kids who've been with me for a while because this is what we do. But I really don't expect that when I have so many new kids. I honestly, for a couple of years in summer camp, I stopped taking new kids because it's a lot to help a group of new kids learn how to be flexible all at the same time on, day one of camp. It's a lot. So this is actually the first year in a few years that I've allowed new kids to come to camp. Usually they have to be in the year-round program first, but it was a really great first week. Was just really happy with how everybody did. At the end of Thursday, when everybody was cleaning up, the kiddo who had smashed the tiles the day before, reached over and took apart somebody else's marble tower while we were cleaning up. And so someone reached over and took apart his marble tower. And we kind of went downhill from there. He ended up kind of throwing the whole tub that had everything in it that everybody was picking up. And I ended up needing to dismiss, it was time to go. So I ended up dismissing everybody else and checking with his parent to see if he could, if the kiddo could stay with me until he was able to pick everything up. So anytime in the past, this is not super uncommon or unusual. I'm on my 9th year at Starfish. This has happened, multiple times throughout the years. And my preferred intervention is always for the kiddo to stay until we're able to pick it up. I think the longest I've done is 2 hours one time that I had a kiddo staying with me until we got things picked up. It's really important to me that kids recognize this is a natural consequence of making a mess like this, especially stuff that's not yours, is that now you got to pick it up. So we had a pretty rough time at first. He was, wanting to throw things all around the room. And so I ended up clearing everything out of the space that he was in. I was trying to see how I could get him engaged in picking up. So I started tossing the marbles into the bucket like I was shooting baskets. And I was intentionally missing sometimes to see if I could kind of hook him in and get him engaged. And that didn't work. But he did eventually come around and he ended up picking everything up by himself. I didn't help him pick anything up. I just moved things so that they were closer to him because he's young and he wasn't really thinking about moving the bucket around the room as he went. So I was moving everything closer to him just to make it easier for him. But he ended up picking everything up and putting it away. And then we're done. It was about 30 minutes. So definitely not the longest stint I've ever had with something like that. But I'm always just really, really proud of kids when they're able to try again and when they're able to make something better. I think that's such a life lesson to recognize that we can always try again and that we can always make something better. And again, kids don't get in trouble at Starfish. So he's not in trouble. The consequence was he had to pick it all up. So there's nothing left on Monday. There's no consequence. He had to pick all that up. And that reminds me that while the other kids were leaving, one of the other younger kids was telling his mom in the hallway about what was happening. And I don't remember exactly what he was saying, but he was saying something kind of negative about the kiddo who had thrown the marbles. But this kiddo had also had a hard time at camp that day, same day. Oh, I'll talk about that. That'll be the last thing I talk about. I didn't write that in my notes. And so I just mentioned to him that we all have a hard time sometimes. Everybody in the whole world has a hard time sometimes. And it doesn't mean that we're bad. It doesn't mean that we're anything. It just means we're having a hard time. And I pointed out how he had been having a hard time earlier and that, nobody had said anything, kind of rude or disrespectful when he was having a hard time. And that kiddo so many kids are really, it's just the logic. When I speak to them logically, they're like, oh yeah, I totally get that. That totally makes sense. And so just having that conversation with him, he totally got it. That totally made sense to him. And I don't expect him to say something like that again when somebody's having a hard time, not because he got in trouble for what he said, because he absolutely didn't, but because I helped him recognize that that was him not so long ago. And it could be anybody else on any given day. So this kiddo, he and I were talking about something, and he wasn't understanding what I was trying to ask him to do. Just totally fine. The challenge is that I needed to go and be with the group, the rest of the group. And so I couldn't keep having this one-on-one conversation with him. Again, we're not a one-on-one program, we're a group program. And he got really frustrated because I wouldn't keep talking to him about what we were talking about, which is very understandable. But one of the things I really need kids to learn is that sometimes the answer is no. And when somebody says they don't want to talk about something anymore, we have to be able to let that go. He ended up following me around and kind of pestering me to keep talking about it. But Steph, and I just kind of kept ignoring him. And one of the other kids at one point even said, I heard her say she's not going to talk about it anymore. And he was genuinely upset. I mean, he really was upset. And I absolutely get that. I wasn't trying to be disrespectful or rude to him, but I did need him to understand that I had said I wasn't going to talk about it anymore. And I needed him to be able to move on. He ended up telling the kid that he was supposed to be playing a game with, and that kid ended up joining in with him, and the two of them were following me around. Oh my goodness. It was hard for me to kind of keep my, it was annoying and funny at the same time. But I've been stubborn a really long time, like decades. And so I will win the stubbornness game every time. And so I just kept, sometimes I would say something to another kid. I finally ended up going to the kid who wasn't the one originally upset. And I just told him, I said, I'm really surprised that you're choosing to be part of this instead of playing a game. I said, number one, none of it's your business. It actually has nothing to do with you. And I said, I really appreciate how you're trying to be a good friend to him and stand up for him, but it's not your business. I already said I'm not going to talk about it anymore. And I said, you're missing all of game time. And I said, it's going to be really a bummer if game time's over and it's time to go home and you did not get to play a game. And again, then I walked away. I am not confrontational with the kids ever if I can help it. So I walked away. And then about 2 seconds later, he came and asked me for a game. And I said, oh yeah. I said, who are you going to play with? And he said the name of the kid who was having a hard time. Like, duh, we're partners. We're going to play a game together. So I asked them what game they wanted. I gave them the game and they went and sat down and started playing. And so I went over to them and I just said, you guys, I am so proud of you. I'm so proud of you for being able to let it go and move on. Like, thank you for being so flexible. That's really amazing. And then we went on about the rest of our afternoon until, the Marvel incident, which wasn't about either one of them. So I'm just so proud of all the kids all the time for everything that they learn, for everything that they connect, for the way that they are with each other, for their willingness to try new things and meet new people and be in this new environment. For a lot of them, we've just had such a great first week of camp. So I am excited for the rest of it. As of now, we have 5 weeks total scheduled with a 6th one pending. I'm just so excited. This first week, I don't know that it could have gone any better. Kids having issues along the way is why we're here. So it would have been kind of boring if none of that had happened, because that's why we're here. I'm not here to only enroll kids who follow directions and comply and do what they're told. I don't do those things. So, that's not why we're here. We're here to work on, being flexible and getting along with other people and being part of a group. And anytime we're doing that, there's going to be some challenges along the way. And that's why we're all here. So I'll see you again next week and we'll talk about our second week of camp. So Thank you for being here. I am really glad you're here.